Hi there, Professor Joe O'Mani here, talking about leverage this time. Now, it's quite interesting. If you look at David Meister's work, who was the authority on consulting in the 80s and 90s, leverage played an absolutely crucial part in all of his books and all of his thinking. Now, leverage is the ratio of seniors to juniors, typically measured by the number of partners and the number of juniors, or divided by the number of juniors. Leverage ratios in larger firms would typically range from 1 to 7, one partner to every 7 juniors for a strategy or a brains firm, all the way up to 1 to 30 for a process firm. Now, David Meister emphasised this a lot because he dealt with big firms. But as you grow, you should start paying more attention to leverage. It is relatively common that I go into a, say, 10 million revenue firm, and they're pottering along at 17 EBITDA, 17% EBITDA, and I look at their gross margin, and it's not what it could be, or it doesn't live up to the benchmarks. And then I look for the team breakdown by service line, and very often there'll be 2 principals, a couple of consultants, and then a couple of junior consultants, analysts on the project, which is a pretty terrible leverage ratio for a process firm, a firm that's should be quite commodified. And what they're sacrificing there, well, there's 2 things typically would happen. Number 1, they're getting low project margin, but number 2, their seniors are too involved in the delivery, fixing, responding to junior queries in order to sell. So building strong IP is absolutely crucial in enabling good leverage. So I would recommend that as you grow, so typically what should happen as you grow is that your leverage ratio gets higher and higher. At the very large firms, 30 or 40 consultants to every senior isn't rare with firms like Accenture and IBM, but you're probably not going to get anywhere near that, and shouldn't aim to get anywhere near that. But you should be measuring your leverage ratio and reviewing it quite regularly with a view of improving it. And the key way of improving it is obviously your juniors. Now, with your leverage ratio, you need to make sure that the ratio is suited to the type of work that you are doing. So as I indicated before, in a brains firm or an experience-based firm where a lot of the information is going to be in people's heads, that there isn't a standardized answer to most things, and the service isn't quite commodified, and the outcomes aren't quite similar, and the process isn't quite similar, then you're going to have quite personalized work. There's a good article on this in Harvard Business Review by Hansen that was written some time ago, or you could read David Meister's book, Managing the Professional Service Firm, where he talks about it. Now, in those firms, you're going to be getting quite low leverage ratios. In more process-based firms, and obviously as you grow, you want to be more process-based. So, even if you have a lot of experienced people, you want to be getting some of that experience out of their heads and onto paper, into frameworks, partly for thought leadership purposes, but also partly for intellectual property. And therefore allowing leverage, but also training, competence management, and all the rest of it. Your IP should feed into your training processes. So from a buyer's perspective, if I'm a buyer looking at firms, it's quite interesting. Buyers typically put intellectual property as number 2 on their wish list of firms that they want to buy. That's obviously after margin or margin growth. And the reason for that is twofold. Number 1, strong intellectual property indicates a firm that is ready for scaling or has already started scaling. So if you've got a package of material that is rinse and repeat, this is the method, we do it, it works, we add to the IP, that's a firm that's ready for scaling. If you're kind of bimbling along, there's inconsistent methodologies, there's inconsistent outcomes, and there's a lot of variability in the firm, then it's probably not ready for scaling. You're still in the growth phase. In other words, you're still really working out what you do and how you do it. The second reason it's important, and it's related to the first, is that a buyer will typically be able to pick up whatever intellectual property you've got that's working and get their salespeople behind it. And then that increases the revenue for them and all the rest of it. So your leverage ratio as you grow, and when you're in the growth phase and you're working out really what you're doing, you don't need to pay that much attention to leverage ratios as long as you're making decent money. But once you have a clear idea of what you are doing as a firm, then you should be seeking to increase the ease and effectiveness of using juniors instead of seniors, and that means paying attention to your leverage ratio. Now, a leverage ratio is an outcome KPI. It's not an input KPI. So it depends on your quality of IP. There's no point going for a 25-to-1 leverage ratio if your IP is rubbish. The risk there is that your juniors are going to do low quality work and annoy clients, and there'll be lots of repeat requests for improvements from the seniors and from the clients. So you want to be avoiding that, but you want to be led by IP. So the leverage ratio is the outcome. The inputs are quality intellectual property, pushing the work down to juniors, ensuring that seniors are freed up for business development, ensuring that the intellectual property is actually being used, ensuring that it's being updated, and having an annual review of your intellectual property. Now, obviously, I'm talking more about delivery IP here rather than sales or other forms of IP. And buyers are interested in all types of IP in your firm, but obviously delivery IP is the crucial part, and does lead to higher valuations of firms. So track your leverage ratio. If it's not increasing, why isn't it increasing? Is it at the core of your firm? Your leverage ratio should impact or should drive the type of people you recruit, the type of intellectual property you have. High leverage ratio firms tend to recruit people that are comfortable with process, that are detail orientated. They tend to pay lower than, say, strategy firms that have a low leverage ratio. They tend to have training that is more on the job and IP based rather than mentoring from partners. So there's a whole host of differences between what you might expect in a low leverage versus a high leverage firm. So definitely something to start paying attention to.